This is Rumi's guide to getting started with grazing management. We'll be sharing tips and tricks to help you improve your farm business profitability and resilience. In this video, we'll be talking about energizers and earthing. Electric fences are really effective forms of subdivision. They are quick to erect, easy to move, and pretty low cost on a pounds per metre basis. However, they're only effective if they're carrying sufficient voltage to deter the livestock from touching them. Because an electric fence is a psychological barrier, not a physical one. With traditional fences, animals will touch and rub against them, and therefore the strength of the fence is the strength of the materials. However, with electric fencing, it's more nuanced. It's a psychological barrier. So it's more about having an effective voltage in the wire, and whether that's steel or poly wire, having the correct number of wires, the correct wire spacing, and the correct wire height. The Energizer itself is only as good as the earthing system, because what's happening with the Energizer is the live side of the Energizer is connected to the fence wire itself, and what the Energizer is doing is sending a very concentrated pulse of energy through the fence at regular intervals, so that an animal touching it will get a shock. The animal in essence is completing the circuit between the positive fence and the negative earth. So you can get Energizers that just use batteries, and they're the lowest cost option, but you've got to keep charging the batteries. So you really need two batteries, one on charge and one being used, and remember to change them over. And the number one reason animals tend to escape is just because there wasn't any voltage in the fence. And the main reason for that normally is because the battery's flat. Something to consider then to prevent that happening and to reduce labour and the risk of animals escaping is to use a solar energizer, such as one beside me. So that's got a built-in solar panel which supplies a battery, and they're generally quite well set up so they'll be able to supply enough voltage to the fence to keep going even in cloudy weather or even on the shoulder of the season when days are shorter. In terms of what an effective voltage would be, well, for ewes and lambs we're generally looking for between 4,000 and 6,000 volts, whereas for cattle we're looking between 3,000 and 5,000 volts. And if we can keep the voltage within that range, then that should mean we get optimal performance and optimal respect from the stock. I would recommend checking the fence voltage on a daily basis using a fence tester. This is a device which, when held on any wire being powered by the Energizer, shows you the voltage, and some more advanced models also show you if there's any faults in the fence. The fault finding element is particularly useful if you start to add more fences to a system, or really recommended when you're using a mains Energizer. And mains Energizers are the most powerful Energizers available. They don't draw a lot of power themselves. In fact, many units draw less power than a 60-watt light bulb, but they're able to produce a large amount of power for powering long distances. So it's perfectly possible with the right layout and using the right materials in the fences, so this would be mainly high tensile wire, for a mains Energizer to power an area in excess of 500, 600, even 700 acres. The Energizer itself is only as good as the earthing system, because as we said, the Energizer, or the animal, is making the connection between the live wire and the earth, the ground. That is only possible if the Energizer itself is properly earthed. So quite often the typical setup might be like you see behind me, with the Energizers mounted on a stand, and we're using the stand to earth the Energizer. And in wet conditions that's probably perfectly fine for a relatively small Energizer, let's say around less than or 1 joule. However, in conditions like we've got today, where it's very dry, that earth will be completely ineffective, because for an earth to be effective, the earth itself needs to be present in damp ground for that continuity to be there. So a better setup in this situation would be to not use the earth stand, but to drive in probably a 1 metre long galvanised earthing stake into the ground. And what I may do on a dry farm in particular is end up with a few of these stakes driven in strategic locations that I can move my solar Energizer around with and put in place. I may also need to water those earths in dry conditions. So with Energizers, we're looking at output joules, 1 joule per 1 to 2k of fence, particularly where polywire and vegetation is involved. Ensuring the Energizer is correctly earthed, and again, a rule of thumb for earthing, we're looking to have at least ½ a metre in the ground per joule of Energizer output. If we can achieve those things, we'll have a very effective fence, and it's certainly worth checking your fence voltage on a daily basis. If we check the voltage, if the voltage is right, we've got the right number of wires, and the fence is the right height, there really shouldn't be any issues with animals escaping.
Improve your soil health and increase your farm's productivity. Get started with Rumi today by clicking on the link in the description.